Good morning, everyone. We'll call this meeting of Board of Curators of the University of Missouri for the September meeting to order. First of all, just as a reminder to everyone, including the curators, that this is being live streamed. So if we speak, be sure to speak closely enough to the microphone that it's picked up by those out in the hinterlands who are listening in. For those of you at this table, you're aware of that, but perhaps others attending today, media and others may not be aware of the fact that Dr. Choi will not be with us in person today. He will join us very shortly by Zoom through our morning session. We'll also make his report. Dr. Choi has the distinct honor to be with Governor Greitens right now on a trade mission to South Korea. And while in South Korea, they're going to have the opportunity to meet with Korean business leaders and also higher education leaders, including the #1 science university in South Korea and the #1 comprehensive university in Korea. These could present tremendous opportunities for our university system, all 4 campuses. And we appreciate Governor Greitens recognizing the opportunity and the need to engage the University of Missouri in this visit. And we look forward to hearing from not only the governor's office, but from Dr. Choi on his return. This is our public meeting for those in attendance from media and elsewhere. There will be an executive session, but I doubt if we'll get to our executive session until around 4 o'clock this afternoon, give or take a few minutes. The first item of business is a very pleasurable business for all of us on the board, because we get to give the oath of office to new curators, Bernsick, returning curator John Sunvold, and the student representative Courtney Lauer. Cindy, if you as board secretary would go to the podium, we'll, as we always have done in the past, we'll call individual curators up and be administering the oath of office. And Julia, you're first up.
Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Julia Bernsick, do solemnly swear
I, Julia Bernsick, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and that I will faithfully demean myself
and that I will faithfully demean myself
as a member of the Board of Curators
as a member of the Board of Curators
of the University of Missouri System.
at the University of Missouri System.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm also particularly pleased to ask that John Sunvold go up with Cindy and be administered the oath as a curator. He has done this before, and we're really excited that he has returned to us as a board member.
I, John Sunvold, do solemnly swear
I, John Sunvold, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and that I will faithfully demean myself
and that I will faithfully demean myself
as a member of the Board of Curators of the University of Missouri System.
as a member of the Board of Curators of the Missouri System.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next, student representative Courtney Lauer will receive the administration of the oath as student representative to the Board of Curators.
I, Courtney Lauer, do solemnly swear
I, Courtney Lauer, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and the Constitution of the State of Missouri,
and that I will faithfully demean myself
and I will faithfully demean myself
as the student representative
as a student representative
to the Board of Curators of the University of Missouri.
to the Board of Curators of the University of Missouri.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Courtney, welcome, and I think I'm accurate when I say that I don't think Courtney has actually missed a 2017 meeting of the Board of Curators. She's been earlier here as an observer, a very interested observer, and we're so happy, Courtney, to have you on board.
Thank you, Chairman.
Now we'll turn to the general business agenda. The first item is the consent agenda. You have 10 items on the consent agenda. Hopefully, if you've looked through your materials that were sent to us, there is backup information for all 10 of those consent agenda items. Does anyone have any questions, or do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion, if it's time, to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? Cindy, would you call the roll on that vote?
Curator Burnsick,
Yes.
Curator Chapman,
Yes.
Curator Farmer,
Yes.
Curator Graham,
Yes.
Curator Lehman,
Yes.
Curator Phillips,
Yes.
Curator Snowden,
Yes.
Curator Steelman,
Yes.
Curator Sunbold.
Yes.
All votes in favor.
Motion carried. The 10 items on the consent agenda will be approved. At this time, as indicated by our agenda, we'll turn to Darrell, the Governance Resources and Planning Committee. That committee, active members would be you, Julia, and David Steelman. And so I'll turn it over to you, and you can conduct, at this time, open up and conduct your Governance Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the Governance Resources and Planning Committee has two items today. Both are discussion items. The first information item will involve a discussion of whether to change the board's bylaws requiring roll call vote on all matters. The second information item will be a discussion on reviewing the university's collective rules and regulations. Because these are both information discussion items, I will invite all members of the board to participate regardless of whether you're on the committee or not. Okay, so let's go to consideration of changing our voting procedures.
Pull that just a little bit closer for you.
Okay, great, thanks, Marcy. So with our discussion regarding changing the voting procedures, the question is whether we should change the board's bylaws, which currently require a roll call vote on all matters. It's my understanding that under the Sunshine Law, roll call votes are required on two types of actions. First of all, roll call votes are required on votes to go into closed session, and number two, roll call votes are required on votes taken during closed session. Obviously, we'll continue to comply with the law in voting on these types of matters, so the question for discussion is whether we should amend our bylaws to permit some other form of voting on those matters that do not require a roll call vote by law. Steve, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think you've framed the issue correctly, and as I said, that there are some that are required by law, others that are not required by law to be a roll call vote. The board in the past has made a policy decision to go ahead and make all votes roll call votes, but I think it's certainly worth discussing whether there is a way to more efficiently take those votes that are not required to be roll call by law.
So it looks as though we have three options at this point. First, we can make no change to the bylaws and continue to require roll call votes on all matters. Number two, we can abolish roll call votes in favor of voice votes on any action that does not legally require a roll call vote, or we can find something in between. So let me outline some of the pros and cons of doing this proposed change, and then open this up for discussion from the whole board. So if we do roll call votes, the pros of that, as far as being a public institution, roll call votes are transparent, allow the public to know how each curator voted on a matter, and shows the public that the board is willing to go beyond the minimum requirements by law. Some of the cons are it's a little bit more time-consuming, cumbersome, and probably unnecessary, given some of the things that we vote on. With just voice votes, some of the pros are it's faster, less cumbersome. Almost all votes are unanimous. so transparency is rarely an issue. Cons, a little bit less transparent, complies with the bare minimum of the law. We can also do something in between, which would be, an example would be voice votes unless a voice vote turns out not to be unanimous, in which case the board would then take a roll call vote on that particular matter. Some of the pros of that, voice votes are faster and less cumbersome. Transparency of roll call vote when voice votes are not unanimous. Cons, we lose some of the appearance of transparency and that the board is willing to go beyond mere requirements of the law. So I want to open it up for discussion. Does anyone have any thoughts on this as we move forward?
I like the hybrid.
Okay.
I do too.
Steve, why don't you kind of give an example of how what the hybrid would look like?
Sure. So as you all know, most of our votes are in fact unanimous. So, and we're only talking about those votes that are not required by law to be roll call. So on those votes, you could call for a voice vote. Presumably, most of them will be unanimous, and you could move on to the next item. If it was not unanimous, you would then call for a roll call vote. That would allow each curator to cast their vote and the public to know how each curator voted.
Well, I like everyone else. I think it makes sense to eliminate needless roll call votes. You do have the situation, the possibility of a situation where if you had a voice vote, someone could just remain silent and not vote in favor. But I assume at that point they'd be recorded as voting in favor. I don't know if that's an issue or not.
Would we ask the question, simply, does anyone have an objection? And then if we hearing none, we move forward? Is that?
I think we can take care of it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think it's a serious problem, but it would provide the opportunity for someone to not vote.
Okay.
And from a procedural standpoint, you're right, it would be the responsibility of the chair or whoever's calling for the vote to ascertain not only that there were sufficient votes in the affirmative, but that it represented a majority of either the committee or the board.
John, I think you have.
Curators, Chapman, would it be different on a phone vote? I mean, I can see what you're saying publicly when we're together and we vote, because if it's simple. Would it?
Good point.
Does there have to be a difference on a
Good point,
phone?
maybe yeah.
I'm just saying on a phone vote, because we have to do that. I don't.
Maybe we need a different standard for when we're on the phone, and at least it helps me out on the other end and know who's in, who's out. Here we can see each other, so.
There's no way a chair could tell on a telephonic meeting a voice vote, whether, you could tell the no votes, but you couldn't.
You could just change, I mean, I like what the hybrid model is obviously here, but I think you could change it for the phone so that we
Sure.
know when Cindy's calling, we know. I mean, you'd hear the voice on the other end.
Even if you did it on the phone, if you asked for the votes in favor by voice, and then asked the second question, which are there any votes not in favor?
That's fine.
If there is no response, then you can assume that you have a majority, and if there is a response, then you would move the roll call vote.
Okay.
That's fine.
Any other comments? Okay, so if there are no further comments, as set forth in the board materials, our bylaws require special advance notice of any change to the bylaws. So we'll put together a proposed change reflecting today's discussion, circulated each of you at least 30 days before the December meeting, in hopes that we can potentially vote on it at our meeting in December. Everyone okay with that?
That's good.
All right. Yes. Oh, go ahead.
Are we?
No. Yes.
Okay. I guess I should say, any objections to that? Okay, so,
For a vote.
that's right. Okay, so our next item, information only, is review of the collective rules and regulations. So the university's faculty, staff, students, and the board done a lot of work over the last few years in reviewing and revising the collective rules and regulations. The past several months, several of those rules have been brought to the board for revision. The purpose of today's information item is to discuss continuing that review, especially the remaining rules, and perhaps taking another look at those rules that were recently revised. I anticipate this will be a lengthy review, given the nature and scope of the university's collective rules. My view is that any such review must tap the experience of those in the university family who are knowledgeable about the subject matter of those rules under review, and the review must involve shared governance. It's very important. As curators, we have obligated ourselves to support and defend the practice of collaborative governance as a fundamental characteristic of good university governance. We must be cognizant of that obligation. So with the overarching principles of subject matter expertise and shared governance in mind, I open the floor for thoughts on that review. So, Julia, I know, has done a lot of work and research in that regard, and I want to start the discussion off. I know Marcy's done some research and some work, Steve as well. Several others may be able to chime in too. But I'd like Julia to kind of start the discussion on this because she's brought up some very interesting ideas and has given a lot of thought to this, and I want her to share her thoughts and comments with the board.
Thanks, Curator Chapman. And good morning, Kansas City. Turning to the collected rules,
Julie, 1 minute. Can I make sure that Moon is on? Moon, can you hear everything that is going on?
Yes, I can. Thank
Good,
you.
Good. And officially welcome. I just checked, and you are exactly, let's see if I've got this right, you are exactly 6,515 miles from us, and I know that this is not the best time in the world for you to be on a call for a meeting, but we do appreciate that. But I wanted to make sure you heard this conversation.
good morning, President.
Thank you. Thank you.
So turning to the collected rules, as you know, the university...
morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. There's a little delay. As you all know, the University of Missouri System Review Commission called for a review of the university system's collected rules and regulations to examine ways the system can improve its governance, accountability, and administrative agility. This review is not to occur in a vacuum. Rather, we were asked to examine best practices from other universities around the country, with particular emphasis on the AAU and land-grant institutions, and to look for and describe best practices to serve faculty, students, and administrators in making changes. As Curator Chapman indicated, we are committed to shared governance. And now that we finally have a full board of curators, we want to tackle this project together by working collaboratively within the board and with you. We plan to engage curators, faculty, and administrators from each campus, and even community leaders with subject matter expertise where needed. We believe this project will create opportunities for each of these constituents to work together and share ideas for ways the university system could better govern itself. This project will be guided by principles of open communication and transparency, as well as defined project plans for completing the reviews and ultimately making decisions. We identified 10 of the top land-grant and AAU state schools based on recently released college rankings to use as benchmarks in this review. We've compiled all of the university system's collected rules, and now we are in the process of pulling these other top universities' rules and lining them up with like subject matters for easy comparison. The list of universities that we selected initially is by no means intended to be either comprehensive or exclusive, just a starting point to help organize the project. Daryl mentioned some ideas that this review of some of other states' rules had generated. And in the spirit of open communication and transparency, several public state universities have an advancement or a development committee that is responsible for overseeing fundraising. Given some of the university system's funding issues, a question that I think we would like to answer together is whether a board committee dedicated to governing the university system's fundraising strategy would help us. I don't offer an answer, just posing questions that I'd like all of us together to answer. So that's just the type of example of questions that this project would be designed to evaluate. Thank you.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Curator, and I appreciate all the work you've done, and I am particularly think that this idea of a development fundraising committee might be an interesting idea so that we are on top of this more regularly. I have a pet issue, though, as you know, which is faculty responsibility. In your thoughts, should we divide up? If there's a global review, I'm afraid that some issues need to be handled different than others. In particular, I'm very interested, as I've told you, in what Dean LeBoa has seen on this, because she has actually been involved, which prior to her, when was the last time a tenured faculty member was removed? At
MU, no one can remember.
So she's the only dean that's alive that anybody has any experience on that. So my question, though, is what are your thoughts as to whether this should be a global review, whether we should divide it up, whether some areas are handled bubbling up through faculty and some may have more of a top-down approach? For instance, we're going to get to a change on capital improvement, which has really been a curator issue, but as we'll discuss, I think that's a curator prerogative. So you got any thoughts on that?
I do, and thank you for asking. I think that with respect to the faculty governance issues, those are going to be reviewed, and recommendations would come forward from the faculty. You know, to the extent the faculty is interested in maintaining some sort of a relationship with someone on the board, they're welcome to do that. But I don't think that all the issues, to your point, are going to be treated the same. By contrast, take the Board of Curators bylaws. Those are rules that we use to govern ourselves. So we may not have a whole lot of external engagement, but I think we should have, transparency in talking about, what we're looking at and engaging others to determine, how they think the best way of approaching it would be. I think that with facilities, for example, there's a whole compendium of collected rules regarding facilities. I would imagine that each of the campuses would have faculty who would be interested, maybe working with the IFC to determine who would be interested in sharing their points of view, and having whoever on the Board of Curators is interested in working on that issue, either based on interest or expertise, would shepherd the review of those rules by soliciting the input of faculty and campus administrators.
Have you thought about what the board should do as far as setting timelines or objectives and times for us to meet those?
Yes, and I don't think that, I don't pretend to suggest that everything can be done within, light speed or even that we would be able to set the timelines at this point for when each of these reviews would need to be completed. But I think that by working together, we could establish those and set, some more defined, as part of that transparency, project timelines.
And I have a question here for you, Julia. When we start talking about subject matter expertise and getting the right people working on the relevant set of rules, can you tell us about this working group idea and what those working groups would look like, and how many working groups are we talking, and size of those working groups? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think those, sort of collective, those projects would be managed depending upon the board's engagement, who wants to be involved and with what issues. Curator Sunvold may have interest in 5 of the collected rules and, the related expertise. And then I think, he would probably then engage, with IFC with respect to, the various campuses and the faculty's interest in being engaged and as part of those discussions. And I think there would also be, the expertise within the administration that we'd want to call upon. So, a lot of the finance rules, I would expect Mr. Rapp to be involved. So I think it just kind of depends, but, I haven't created any master plan here. It would be guided by you.
And Thank you, Julian. One other question. Have you looked at any peer institutions to kind of see what they have done in the past during their rule reviews? And who did you find, or what peer institution did you find, or peer institutions did you find influential or a good model to follow here?
You know, there's the AGB has had a number of publications that have kind of weighed on my thinking. They recommend reviewing rules periodically to make sure that they're current, and I know it's been quite some time since we've taken a, comprehensive review of all the rules. I think depending upon what's been revised, the approach is a little bit different in terms of, like the faculty rules are traditionally handled by the faculty making recommendations up, whereas maybe some of the finance rules have been maybe more driven by the administration. So, there's a number of universities that have gone through this. I wouldn't say that I've identified any one of them as being the right way, because I also think that we've got to do it the right way for us. But the point is that we do it together, and that we commit to a timeline, and we get engagement.
Any other thoughts, Marcy?
Well, as you know, we have done over the last couple of years a fair amount of updating and revision of a lot of our collected rules, but there, as pointed out, and as we've all agreed over the last several months, there's still a lot of work left to do, and some of the more important collected rules have been left undone. My own thought is, and we always talk about, is this a top-down effort or a bottom-up effort? And the only thing I would want to share from my standpoint is that before we actually get started, I think there needs to be a very definitive plan, and that and as you point out, Julia and Darrell, different sets of rules involve different constituencies. And I would hate to start anything without those constituencies being involved at the get-go. And so I think the organization of this and the development of the plan is going to be the key to it. And faculty are going to have a significant interest in these rules, as are administrators. And we've got resources like Dr. Choi and our chancellors and other administrators who have had experience with collected rules at other institutions. So I think we need to make sure that all of these constituencies are involved and participatory from the very beginning. And I think that also that broad board involvement would be helpful. And as you point out, maybe different curators working in different areas, but I do think that it makes sense to have broad board involvement, and also the general counsel's office from the very beginning, because they're going to be crucial to every change that's made. So, I think it's a great idea. I think we're all preaching to the choir. We've all said for months this is we need to continue the process. We've agreed with the legislature that we would do this, and so it's important. But I think the start is the key.
Can I throw out a suggestion, which I should have run by you and you, not in public session, but I think Phil and I would say that we found the idea of the study group to be very productive. We had time, we could set up our own meetings, and we've come up with something. Now, when this all blows up this afternoon on me at 1:30, I may change my mind. But what about a study group right now, not so that everybody understands it will not interfere with joint governance, but what about a study group that can just maybe divide those areas that should be handled either top down or bottom up, or divide those areas and talk about some broad timelines and then bring that back to the board? I mean, I'm just throwing out that idea. I found that work. Phil, didn't you find that work?
I did.
And are you talking about a broad membership in the
Well, I
study
don't even
group?
know. The problem is, and I think we have to have broad involvement, but we did that on this capital basically Ryan and Rick worked their tails off getting around. But when you have too many people, which is what has happened to us on the board, in my opinion, too many times, things don't move. And if we had a smaller group of people in charge of moving it, then we could get it moved and then have the broader involvement. How do you feel about that?
I agree, and I think this
Since I'm
fits
probably
within-
volunteering you for.
Yeah, well, yeah, that would be fine, Curator Steelman. I think this does fit within the governance committee's purview
Okay.
and responsibilities. And ultimately, it is up to the full board how we approach this, but
No, and that's a good point, too. And the governance committee could invite in whoever Moon might designate, or,
Would this study
Yeah.
group that you're thinking about be only curators or involve persons other than curators?
I think it would obviously involve persons other than curators, but my thought is if we go too broad, nothing happens. And so we need to make clear that the university family understands this is not a study group that's going to make decisions, that is going to start the process, and then we'll branch out. Because I could see the study group deciding we have to have a different group for faculty responsibilities, the one, because that's my pet peeve, and a different one for other issues. But I worry, and I'd listen to the other curators who've been on here with me for a while, but we have these discussions, and we seem to have a little difficulty moving the ball forward. So what moves the ball forward?
No, I agree with the suggestions that you're making. Personally, I agree that it needs to be a smaller rather than a larger group. It's gonna require terrific time commitments for that group initially, too.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if I could to ask Julia, in the universities that have done this and have upgraded them, you mentioned there were several. Do any of those have a specific blueprint that they could share with us? And then, not that theirs is perfect, but it looks like if we could look at their blueprint as to how they did it, maybe we could move this thing forward a lot quicker. And I'd like to think, I don't know how long it's going to take, and we don't have a timeline, but, can we have it done by X date, whether that's a year off or 6 months off or 2 years off or whatever it is? But maybe there's some blueprints out there that would really help us from the very start. And going back to what Marcy said, let's start right and figure out what's the best movement there, and then hopefully it'll flow from that point.
well, and I think that the open-ended questions are often, who do you bring in?
Yep.
And, all the universities, subscribe to shared governance, and yet there's disagreement within each of those universities as to what exactly that means. So some of that will be up to us, but in terms of a blueprint, we've taken basically the top several of the top 10 land-grant and AAU schools, and my team back at Express Scripts right now is pulling in all of those rules that will line up to our rules that I think would be a good starting point for discussion. Provide a benchmark, and that's why I say the schools that we selected are by no means exclusive, and you're welcome, to go look at Harvard and Yale, but we didn't start with Harvard and Yale. We started with, some of the peer institutions that are state schools and AAU, within the AAU, but just as a starting point, right? So what I'm proposing doing is having that all laid out in a nice, neat, orderly, even in a chart, that would be a rather large chart, but also with appendix materials that would have the detailed rules. We've already pulled all of our rules, and now we're cross-referencing and organizing these other states' rules to them. We may find that some of them cover areas that we don't have, and we may find that some of them overlap. But it's a starting point. To your point, I don't know if it's necessarily a blueprint, but I think it would provide a starting point. And so what I would propose is maybe, targeting the December meeting with a little bit more of a, I would say concrete, but a little bit more, this is just a discussion, and it seems that everyone's in agreement that we should proceed forward. And so, to your point, Curator Steelman, to ensure that it moves forward, I think if the governance committee kind of takes some ownership here and fleshes some things out in terms of what we would propose the teams or the groups or the task forces or whatever, engage in, then I think we could bring that back to the full board and get approval or
Yeah, I'm
redirection.
very comfortable with that, and because we've had a sufficient discussion, I think, here that it helps you do exactly what you've just described. Does anyone have any problem? It doesn't take a resolution, but does anyone
Yes.
have any?
Curator Chapman.
Yes, President Troy.
Curator Chapman, this is Moon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
I
can.
think there's a little bit of a delay, but let me first say that upgrading and refining the collective rules and regulation is very important for this institution. It was actually brought up by the commission report as one of our top items to complete. So I'm glad that we're moving forward with this. As Chairman Graham mentioned, the concept of shared governance is very important, especially with faculty input on decisions that affect faculty affairs. And so having their participation in the study group, I think, makes great sense. And as we are developing the peer institutions for us to evaluate their collective rules and compare our collective rules, it's important to note that the collective rules must work for 4 institutions. While we have an AAU institution in Mizzou, we have 2 urban institutions and a science and technology university. So identifying peer institutions to those institutions as part of the sample of universities for us to compare, I think makes a lot of sense. So I look forward to working with you. This will be an exciting project. It'll take a lot of work, but I believe that at the end of the day, we're going to have a stronger university that is less burdened by rules that were developed generations ago that no longer apply.
Dr. Troy, those were great suggestions, and we will be sure to make those, the things that you mentioned, a priority as we, put together this study group and move forward in this process.
I'd like to, not sure mine's on.
Thank you.
Is it on?
We would never have yours on.
So I think it's a great initiative, and it ought to move forward. I did like the way the study group worked, that is the finance study group that talked about capital improvements. And I hope that as the committee or study group, whatever you end up doing it, will, before you come back with a complete revision, have someone, whether it was Ryan Rapp and Rick, who took a lot of time to come around. I thought that was very helpful. And so that would be a collaborative way of doing it. And also, to the extent that an individual board member had a particular area of interest, you can tap into that curator as you go along. So I think it's a great idea.
And I would propose circulating the list of at least the subject matters for the rules to be reviewed to all of you and solicit your input regarding any of those that you'd like to be involved in.
Fantastic.
Any other comments or suggestions? Well, as chair of the governance committee, I'd like to propose having Julia take the lead, or Curator Brunswick take the lead on creating a proposal for board review. It would be great to have it prior to our December meeting so that we can at least have something to think about as we move into our December meeting to further this discussion. Julia, are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
Any objections to that? And I think part of what Julia will be doing is putting together a study group. I think we have consensus on that would be a good idea. Keeping shared governance in mind, very important. And finding some peer comparisons that work with that may work in comparison to our unique system here, as Moon has outlined. And Julia, we look forward to hearing from you and let any of us know how we can help out in any way. I'm sure our faculty, other stakeholders in this process would be happy to help out as well and be a resource for you. So keep us posted.
Can I also suggest that you might contact Chair of the Commission, Jeannie Sinkfield, who I think would actually also provide some
Gary
resources. for
Gary
you.
Forsey and
Gary,
Gene.
yeah.
Great ideas.
Okay, hearing no further comments, it's, assuming this discussion is complete, I'd entertain a motion and a second from a member of the committee to adjourn the committee meeting.
We're kind of limited, aren't we? Which do you want to
So
make?
moved.
Second.
All right. Cindy, please call a roll of the committee
That's
members.
enough for a motion and a second.
Barely, we made a quorum.
Curator Burnsick,
Yes.
Curator Chapman,
Yes.
Curator Steelman.
Yes.
All votes in favor.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the business of the Governance, Resources, and Planning Committee. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, now, we're going to move on to general business, and we're a little bit ahead of time, and I'm actually pleased because this is a very important presentation. I'm going to call upon Interim Chancellor Barbara Bickle Meyer to make her presentation as Interim Chancellor of the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And Chancellor, we've appreciated your hospitality so far last evening and continuing through the meeting. But thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to be here, and it's my privilege to be serving as interim chancellor and provost. It's an important time in the history of the University of Missouri system and at UMKC. So let me begin by talking a little bit about the history of UMKC and to set some context for where we are, where we've been, where we are, and where we hope to be. So first of all, I want to point out that UMKC actually is in many ways still reflecting a history that is relatively unique in higher education. We actually came together in 1933 as a private liberal arts college titled Kansas City University. That was because during the Depression, Kansas City civic leaders and the Chamber of Commerce chartered and championed the idea of moving forward in the importance of intellectual development at the time of the Depression. And an interesting little tidbit about the history of UMKC, we have a great history that was just recently written in that idea of the founding as a private liberal arts college. One of the ideas floated around for the title or the name of the institution at that time was Lincoln and Lee University. And again, I'll remind you that we are very close to Luce Park, which is an important Civil War battleground, one of the key Civil War battlegrounds in this area. And secondly, we're very close to state line. So I tell you that because one of the things that I want you to understand is that since our inception, equity, diversity, and inclusion have been critical to the mission of UMKC and the work that we do. So in 33, we were founded as a private liberal arts college. In 1963, we joined the UM system and became the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Interestingly, though, we did actually have some programs that predated us, and that continues to be a legacy as we move forward and learn about ways that we can better work together as a university. So we had a School of Law that predates the institution by some number of years. It was founded in 1895. We have a School of Dentistry that was founded in 1881, and it joined UMKC in 1941. We have a School of Pharmacy that actually was founded in 1886, and it joined UMKC or UKC in 1943. And then, of course, our Conservatory of Music and Dance. I love emphasizing the fact that it is the second oldest conservatory in the country. It was founded a year after Juilliard in 1906. And we have a long legacy, and the conservatory joined then UKC in 1959. So part of our story has been how we come together over the course of time. And first, as a private institution, bringing these schools in, and then secondly, as a public institution, moving into the University of Missouri system. So there are some unique things about UMKC, and again, I'm mindful, as I've spoken to the curators before, about the importance in a system of recognizing the baseline commonalities of universities and of all the universities in the system, but also the unique aspects of each institution. So we can hold ourselves accountable to basic standards, but also so that we can recognize and help our institution flourish in the ways that are unique. First of all, to talk about the comprehensive nature of the university, and I've mentioned this any number of times, coming from Indiana University as a system of 7 campuses and IU Bloomington particularly as a flagship. This is a really comprehensive array of programming, very rare. in institutions. So first of all, we are one of only 18 institutions in the country that have co-located comprehensive health sciences. We have a school of medicine, a school of pharmacy, a school of dentistry, and a school of nursing. And again, to remind the curators who have been here a while, something we mentioned to the new curators yesterday, which is our School of Medicine works on a 6-year model. Our students come in as freshmen, 17 and 18 years old, and that is not common in the United States, but it's very common in Europe. We see some real benefits to our student experience as a result of that. We also have the benefits of the land-grant institution in the fact that we have a School of Computing and Engineering. We also have other graduate programs. Again, the Block School is a school of management. It has both for-profit and nonprofit programs. We have a School of Education that serves the urban core as one of its key priorities. I will note that the School of Education was founded the year after Brown versus Board of Education, which, as you know, was a Topeka case that was just about an hour down the road. So again, a commitment to equity and diversity and inclusion coming out of that founding. And of course, our School of Law does phenomenal work in the region, and a good number of those who serve on the bench in Kansas City on both sides of the state line have UMKC degrees. We have a comprehensive arts and sciences program. We have 19 different departments and a large number of programs in the College of Arts and Sciences. We have a standalone School of Biological Sciences, has a long history, and particularly important because it does feed all of the health sciences programs on Hospital Hill. And we also have recently established University College and Honors College, which I'll talk about a little bit, because it does go to the fact that as you look at our previous programs, you can tell that, again, unlike most institutions of higher education, we really were founded more as a graduate institution with comprehensive programs at the graduate level. And we've just been doing our work over the last 10 years, particularly to start to try to grow down into the undergraduate experience and provide the needs of our region in terms of workforce development, civic development, and civic leadership, and good citizenship. So the University College is particularly important because we have an access and affordability mission. And so we want to make sure that those students who come and who may be less than prepared or don't know exactly what career they want to pursue have the supports and the experience they need. And that's what University College provides. We also are trying to move from being a commuter institution to a destination of choice. And so an honors college is particularly important in that regard because it helps us to go out and to develop programs that are both worthy of students who have high ACT scores, but also give that experience of equity, diversity, inclusion. And historically, honors colleges have either given an elite experience or have given an elite experience, but we want to try to give that robust experience for learning in a place of equity, diversity, inclusion. So we have a unique mission, and our honors college is growing significantly over the last several years. Other assets we have, of course, is our location. We are a public urban research university, and what that means for us is that we take seriously our job is to take our teaching and our research in terms of service learning programs, for example, internship programs, for example, but also research that is in translational and service of the community. So we see ourselves as leading in the sense of being conveners of the intellectual development of our city and our region. We don't have significant local competitors in terms of literally in the Kansas City region having other public urban research universities, but I will say that comprehensive teaching campuses such as the University of Central Missouri and Northwest Missouri State are finding their ways into the region, and it's prime, and there's a great need in terms of workforce development. So it makes sense that we'll see those institutions finding their way here. But what's important, and something I emphasized in an editorial to the Kansas City Star last week, is to differentiate what a comprehensive teaching institution is from a research institution, and what kind of different instruction we offer and why that should matter to students. And we also have a phenomenal board of trustees as well as the curators. So with the engagement of leadership and as well as a number of advisory committees we have in the university, there are not many doors, if any doors, in Kansas City in the region that we can't really open given the work that we do. And that leads to the fact that we have extraordinary community support. There's obviously a diverse and growing business enterprise in Kansas City. The chamber, a number of years ago, solicited a consultant to do a report, recommendations about how we move higher education along in Kansas City. It had recommendations for UMKC. It also had some recommendations for KU Medical Center as it related to health education particularly. But all of those big ideas involved Kansas City. And I think that comes from the fact that, again, ever since 1933, really, or 1929, the city leaders have been recognizing that Kansas City needs a top-tier university, and the question is, how do we move forward and how do we grow to that position? We've got unique partners. Again, curators have had tours today, or yesterday. You saw MRI Global, you saw Stowers, you saw the Health Sciences District and all the partners we have there, but you also saw or haven't seen Kauffman Foundation, which is really right across the street. Nelson Atkins is a partner for us in work. And again, the Kansas City Art Institute was just there last week talking about programming's art entrepreneurship, work that we're going to be doing with the Block School and KCAI. And again, interestingly, KCAI does quite a bit of 3D printing that connects our School of Medicine and Children's Mercy in terms of looking at how children's hearts are formed and how to do surgery on those hearts. So we have a huge potential in terms of partnership here. Also, we have Rockhurst across Troost, and Rockhurst is an institution that shares with us in terms of our computing and engineering courses. And so we've got great opportunities in many ways in the work that we can do and the growth that we can achieve. We also have in Kansas City, from a philanthropic perspective, the highest per capita giving rate in the country. And generally, much of that is KC-centric, and so we appreciate the support we have of the philanthropic community. We also have capacity to grow, and that's something that we're looking at right now. Our trends in a highly competitive, changing environment of higher education have not been necessarily in all the directions we want them to go. We also haven't been quite as strategic as we could be in the recent past to move ourselves in the direction. So when I talk about what we're doing this year and how we're moving forward, I'll be indicating some key initiatives that we have to help us move our trend lines. But in the meantime, one of the things that we know is we have capacity to grow because our student-faculty ratio is, depending on exactly the report, 13 to 1 or 14 to 1, and that gives us some room. Again, though, I would mention that some of that, you really have to look at our portfolio of programs. So, for example, programs on Hospital Hill have caps that are accredited. The conservatory has caps that are set by accreditors. So where our room to grow is important to find out, and I'll talk about how we're going about that momentarily. We have highly regarded faculty. Again, you saw some of their work yesterday on Hospital Hill. We have similar amazing research that's going on the Volker or the Plaza campus. And generally, we have NIH funded initiatives, we have Department of Defense funded initiatives, we have NSF funded initiatives. We are present in the key granting agencies of the federal government. We talked about small class sizes, enhanced facilities. You've seen some of the beautiful spaces that we have as you've toured around campus. You've also seen some of the challenges we have, and we're working on through our facilities master plan and through our priorities on that. And then we have research and service activities that, again, we're doing well on, but we're revisiting what our Office of Research Services delivers and how it goes about supporting our faculty. That's because we have a vision here at UMKC about what the future of higher ed is and what our role is in that. And I won't belabor this because we've talked about this and written about this in other contexts, but I do want to point out that when we put our budget plan forward for President Choi and with the system in March or so, we prefaced that with some significant statements that leadership had come together to make so that we could actually think about what we're building towards instead of just what we're cutting. We talked a lot about pressures to change in higher education and what those are, and we've talked about those a little bit with new curators yesterday. Increasing competition, decreasing state appropriations, new technologies and other things that are impacting us. But we also talked about what are the critical success factors and what is the place we're trying to build. And the importance of this picture is that we know that the future of higher education is that places have to be highly engaging. When our students show up here, they have to know why they're on campus, and it has to be value added. And anything that can be done off campus whether it's, again, paying for your parking pass or paying your bursar bill or accessing information you need from the library. We have to be able to do that in the cloud, on the web, and more in mobile format. So we're recognizing that what we're trying to do is create a purposeful use of space that infuses our research in our teaching and in our service to the community. And again, that's an important part of a public urban research mission. Research is how faculty model for students how to learn. And all of our constituents tell us that we need students who are prepared for work, prepared for a career, prepared for citizenship, and prepared for life. And we have to create the highly engaging experience where our faculty model that for our students and where the research that we do is in service of our greater region. So we're committed to translational, we're committed to outcomes-based, we're committed to research that actually improves our region and our society. That means that we need to foster a learning environment here, not just faculty know things and staff know things and students learn things. Faculty and staff need to be highly engaged in learning in an era that's unprecedented in terms of technological change as well. So that means we're trying to figure out how we carve out support that we haven't had in the past for both data that informs our development and a faculty and staff development enterprise that's more robust than what we've had in the past. And all that gets to the idea of, as a learning organization, we really need to develop platforms for mass customization of learning. Learning is the most personalized thing that a human being does, and we really actually in higher education haven't done that work historically. We've been more committed to gatekeeping than we have been to bridge building, and at UMKC we're moving to a future of bridge building. So let me tell you a little bit about the state as is and where we are and what we intend to do about it. First of all, just some of our enrollment highlights for this year. The good news is that our freshman class is our largest ever. We see a 2% increase over last year. And again, our average ACT score is 25.85, where the state average is 20.2. A couple of reasons why that is important is because, again, we're trying to move from an image of being a commuter campus and being a graduate level institution to an undergraduate destination of choice for students. And so that means we're having to think strategically in ways we haven't in the past about what our attraction is to students, what activities we provide to students, and how we engage them in the life of the institution so that they want to be here and that they find it a particularly compelling experience when they are. But secondly, our Census Day total enrollment had us down slightly over fall of 2016. Our on-campus enrollment was down 2.29% in head count, but also notice that we were only down 0.9% in student credit hours. Again, that tells us something about the fact that we're moving towards more full-time students. We're moving away a little bit from less commuter students. So our challenge is to make that trend line move while we also grow our student head counts and the tuition dollars that generates. The last point is, again, we have been primarily a graduate institution. We have a fair number of international students who come to us for graduate programs. Issues with visa and immigration status have impacted our enrollments of new and returning international students, especially at the master's level, so we're down there, and that's our most significant decrease. I will tell you we're not unlike other institutions that have strong international populations. However, finding our way back through that is important. I do want to take a few moments to talk about our campus climate survey results. Overall, Rankin Associates, the consultants who I believe you heard from, indicated to us that our profile is generally similar to our peer institutions and what they found. There are in some ways that we are in better shape than our peers, but that doesn't mean we don't have work to do, and I will highlight what I think our 6 priorities are moving beyond the campus climate survey. First, we have a relatively high level of comfort with the campus climate. 79% of all the survey responders said they're very comfortable or comfortable with the campus climate. Students gave high marks in some specific areas. 74% said they agreed or strongly agreed that they felt valued by the faculty, which is important if you understand or have any familiarity with the Purdue Gallup poll about alumni and what alumni say is critical to their undergraduate experience that has to do with their relationship with faculty and feeling valued by faculty. So we're doing pretty good there, but we can do somewhat better. 73% said they viewed faculty as role models. Again, that's particularly important. We pride ourselves on our work in undergraduate research, especially, and we see that as an opportunity that we can promote as a strength of the institution. And again, we still have some work that we can do to increase that number. And then finally, and what I'm particularly appreciative of, is that 71% of our students believe the campus climate allows discussion of difficult topics. Again, that can be better than it is, but that is something that after the events of fall 2015, we went to great lengths in this institution in having listening sessions and bringing people together and having open airings and honest conversations. So I appreciate that there's some recognition of that. Several areas of job satisfaction received high rankings from faculty and staff. 70% of tenure and tenure track faculty believe that research is valued. 86, and again, that number needs to increase and can increase. 86% of staff and administrators believe or agree or strongly agree that there's adequate work-life balance support at UMKC, but again, there's work to be done there. So just to highlight a little bit about what we see our areas of expertise or our areas of improvement are, as we insert a picture here of that idea of engagement and of real-world activity, is that we need to, first of all, address the concerns of people who experienced exclusionary behavior. Actually, that number is 17%, not 7% on that slide. 17% of survey respondents said that they experienced some kind of exclusionary behavior because of their position in the university, their ethnicity, age, gender, or gender identity. And I want to point out position, because that was a lot about hierarchy in terms of staff, and one of the most significant numbers there was the relationship between staff and faculty. I do appreciate and have talked to staff council and others about the fact that we honored their request last year to create a staff ombudsperson so that they can have somebody to go to. We also note that this is a place where the standard of faculty conduct will help staff as well as faculty in terms of where we move. And again, I think that is a phenomenally important document in the history of this university system. Secondly, we know that we need to address student needs for a sense of belonging and social life. And again, this really wasn't surprising to us, but we need to change this number particularly because we are moving from a commuter campus, we are moving from a graduate institution. So to continue to work on finding our ways to find out what students desire, what they need, what kind of activities they want to experience on campus that make them feel like this is a place that they want to be and that they find themselves showing up on campus just to be here for the fun of it, we need to do that work. So we've got issues of just improving social life, and by that I don't mean really improving, creating the kind of social life that our students desire. And then again, that third point, need to find ways for staff to voice concerns and gain professional development opportunities. I'll come back and talk about that more in a larger context in a moment. But again, 54% of our staff have considered leaving in the past year due to low salaries and opportunities. And I do appreciate President Choi's recognition of faculty salaries across the UM system, and that is truly an issue here as well. I do want to recognize it's not just faculty salaries here, it's staff salaries. So we have a commitment as we have to grow our institution through substitution right now because we have to learn how to generate more revenue, but while we're taking care of our gaps that come from the decrease in state appropriations, we have to find our ways to carve out and provide the kinds of services that our faculty and staff need and the support that they need. And so I appreciate that opportunity. Next, we need to boost the support for faculty research and professional development. Again, knowing what other institutions are doing and where we are in the at UMKC and the UM system, it is clear to me that in terms of helping faculty work their way through new technologies for teaching and learning to help them in the research enterprise, that we just simply have to do more than we've been able to do in the past in terms of having a center for research, teaching, and learning, and providing them the supports they need to innovate in a moment where they don't have that capacity in terms of programming, professional development, training for new technologies that we need to have. And again, for those of you who have been in large companies, and I had my experience in large corporation before coming back to academia, there are not very many billion-dollar enterprises in for-profit that would not invest in staff development. And that is something that we really have to address at UMKC and in the UM system, and I look forward to doing that work. We need to address the issue of competitive salaries for faculty and staff. I won't belabor that. We've heard about that in other contexts. And we need to ensure adequate support for our students through counseling and disability services. Again, this is a problem across higher education. It's constantly a topic in the Chronicle of Higher Ed. But we have 34% of our students who identified that they have need for counseling or disability services of some form or fashion of another. That can be for learning disabilities or for whatever, but we need to find our way through and to support that. So let me just again, in terms of the as-is state, mention that our current strategic plan has 6 key priorities or 6 goals for us. And hopefully you saw these reflected yesterday for those who had tours. We place student success at the center, and we're working on that. That is actually our commitment from our last accreditation review in the Higher Learning Commission. Our HLC Academy focuses on how we go about supporting students for again, beyond access to retention and completion, and that is ongoing work. Our goal at this point is to be data informed, so we're doing quite a bit to try to lead the pack in terms of how we use new data from learning management systems, from organizations such as Civitas, and again, from the RPK group, which I'll be mentioning shortly, to help us inform where our students experience barriers in the infrastructure that we need to help them overcome and we need to get rid of. Hopefully yesterday, the tour of Hospital Hill and the Health Sciences District helped you understand how we're leading in life and health sciences. I've talked quite a bit about our commitments through research and service to advancing urban engagement. We talked yesterday about the conservatory. You've heard previously about theater. Our commitment is to excel in the visual and performing arts. We embrace diversity. I talked about that as the founding of, principle of the institution, and promoting research and economic development in the region as well as in the state. And again, I will be a proponent as long as I am provost and serving as interim chancellor of the fact that we have got to do a better job at UMKC and in the UM system of helping the state and the region understand the difference between a research enterprise and a comprehensive teaching campus. Other strategic initiatives, just to give you a little bit of highlight about what we have going on here this year as we move into the future of higher ed and of UMKC. We have a multi-layered plan to elevate our academic mission while increasing our fiscal stability and our return on investment, and it has a number of key initiatives. And I just need to give a shout out to everybody at UMKC right now, because I don't think there's a person who's not experiencing in some way or involved in some way change and innovation. And it is a challenging time, but it's something we talk about constantly, and it's something that we promote as an opportunity and something we value doing rather than being forced to do. I'll come back to HLC reaccreditation in a moment, but just so you know, all 4 institutions in the University of Missouri system are accredited by the Higher Learning Commission separately and individually. We are going up for our review. We don't have our exact date yet, but it'll either be in fall of 2019 or spring of 2020. We are right behind UMSL and S&T, who are also going through their reaccreditation reviews. Those establish important baselines and assume practices, and we're using that as an opportunity to make sure that we're compliant with what we need to be compliant with. There is a role for you in all that I will point out in a moment. The events of fall, as we respond to the events of fall 2015, we took an opportunity to redo our value statement. And again, that may seem like it's a soft activity, but I come back and over mention Peter Drucker, the management guru's wisdom that culture eats strategy for lunch. So having posters on walls that talk about how we work with each other, what we value, what we promote is critically important for us. And we hadn't had that for a few years. So it was great to engage in the conversation with all of our constituents over a course of about 15 months to create that document that has been newly minted and just put on the walls at the beginning of the fall semester. We're also engaged in an academic portfolio review that is quite comprehensive. We're looking at all of our courses, all of our programs, our faculty productivity in those. We're looking at everything from applications to admissions to yield, to retention and completion, and the cost of operations. That's been also about a 15-month activity for us. In late October, or early November, we'll be having our last conversation around that. We've had partnership with Eric Vogelweid and System to help make sure that we're aligning our data. One of the challenges of that effort was in an unprecedented way, we brought together data from the finance system, data from the human resources system, and data from the student information systems, and had to identify definitions and coding that hadn't really been in place previously. I'm just going to give you one little snippet, and I'll come back to this slide. The kinds of things that we're getting out of that experience, and this is just one example of one slide, but we can drill down for any particular unit, is indications about the demand and the yield of our undergraduate programs for first-time college students. So we can see what are the high-demand programs, what are the high-yield programs, and where are opportunities to move. That's just the first step of a process that shows us our fill rates for courses, shows us our productivity for faculty across units, shows us our cost of operations, and it will be informing everything about rethinking our academic portfolio as we move forward. We're also engaged in administrative portfolio review. We actually, because we've been working with RPK Group, asked and received an okay from President Choi to use RPK to do our administrative service review or our administrative portfolio review so that we can get a comprehensive picture of our institution. Our commitment in that review is to move towards greater shared services. The important thing, though, about shared services, and we know that this is our opportunity to protect and defend the quality of our academic programs and actually get rid of infrastructure barriers for our students by bringing our academic units and our administrative units together to better serve. Our challenge, though, in that, and this has been our commitment, is that we're going to ensure that we have client experience councils as we bring administration together, and we're going to make sure that we have service level agreements. So, for example, if we're talking about marketing and communications, or if we're talking about advising, we're going to make sure that we've articulated the level of service that we should have around administration and have councils reviewing that on a constant basis to make sure that the deans and the academic units are getting the support that they need. And there's been great partnership across the entire institution in terms of our leadership and deans and vice chancellors to move in that direction. We're also, again, just recognizing that the bottom line incentive is dollars. We are redoing our entire budgeting system. We're moving from historically something that's an adapted responsibility-centered management approach to a new resource investment model that will prioritize the things that matter to us, such as interdisciplinarity and, again, sharing of services. We're redoing our costing model, and we're redoing our budget rules for how we engage and what the process and what the timelines are every year for doing that. We have asked Nikki Krawitz, who is the retired CFO of the system, to work with us on that, and she's been here constantly in the last several months working with Sharon Lindenbaum and other leaders of the university to do that work. And then finally, in the commitment to the student experience, we've convened a couple of access teams, which I'll explain in a moment, as proof of concept or proof of process, and we'll be moving forward over the course of the coming year or years to revisit the student experience. ACCESS stands for Academic Experience Initiatives. Two that we've looked at so far are student recruitment. And again, one of the things that we need to do is look at our recruiting processes from the lens of a student and ask, what are they seeing? Why are they showing up or not showing up? And what do we need to do, and how do we work better to do that? So we had a group working over the course of the entire summer, did a number of student focus groups, collected a lot of benchmarking data, looked at best practices, and a couple of a 35-page or longer document that they have created in terms of a list of series of recommendations. But a couple of highlights are that we can use data to do some predictive modeling to identify the likelihood that students will attend UMKC, so we know how to prioritize their recruitment. Where should we be spending our limited resources and dollars to help us bring the students who are ready to be successful here? And then secondly, we need to do much more in this region with parent and family engagement than we have done in the past. And so how do we bring the family into the university as opposed to simply the student? That's particularly important given our access mission and given first-generation college-going students, underserved minorities, and particularly we've heard about that a fair amount from our Hispanic students and the needs that we have there. That also leads to partnering better with the K-12 schools and reaching farther into middle school than we have in the past to be recruiting. We also have an Axis team on workforce development. Again, we know we live in this region, and we know that we need to not only be a convener of the region, but we also need to make sure that we're connecting with employers to get students into a real work situation, whether that's doing long-term project-based activities for employers on campus in courses, as well as comprehensive career services, and having a workforce readiness program that simply is a series of experiences with appropriate mentorship and support that we see our students through. So we have some restructuring to do to take advantage of some of the places we're doing that well on campus, and to make sure that we provide that comprehensively across all our programs. I will say just a couple of other kinds of things that we're doing this year are, we have over, I think, 200 work-study students that we bring onto campus every year. We're thinking, for example, about how do we better organize work-study students to make sure that we give them a professional development experience, but we also are able to ensure that they're getting the kind of feedback they need, but that we're using the hours that they have to serve in the best and most strategic ways. We're revisiting scholarshiping to make sure we're strategic and to make sure we're competitive. We're revisiting our international operations to make sure that we've got lined up what we need for an international student's experience, and that they don't have to be pointed to one office over here or another office over there, and that we're compliant with all federal regulations on that work as well. So last, just very quickly, back to the Higher Learning Commission and to those baseline accountabilities we have. I will note, and on behalf of my fellow provosts at S&T and at UMSL as well, in the guidelines for HLC are commitments for governing boards. And so I just indicate to you that as we move forward, we will be coming back to you to talk a little bit about what the HLC's expectations are for responsibilities and how we document the work that we're doing. The governing board responsibilities have to do with making sure that the institution acts with integrity and its conduct is ethical and responsible. So I actually applaud the work that you're doing around revisiting the CRRs. Having lived some of those experiences that Curator Steelman mentioned about faculty, and having done that work and made my way through, and having worked with Marcia Fisher on any number of CRRs, I am absolutely sure they can be tightened, they can be strengthened. And again, I said one of the clues for me in working with Marcia is they're called the collected rules and regulations. And to that point, and Steve's heard me say this as well, I am sure that in 1963 or so, 4 institutions convened some faculty and administrators, and they said, let's collect those things, and let's see what sense we can make of them. So I know there's an opportunity, and I think on behalf of all of us, we will appreciate the work that you do in that regard. And that's some of what this particular guideline talks about, is how are we sure that we are engaging with integrity, and how do we define that? How do we make sure that we have the appropriate autonomy? The governing board, how do we make sure that deliberations reflect the priorities to preserve and enhance the institution? And that seems like, strong language, but in an era of reduced state appropriations, and understandably why, we really do have to look at how are we moving forward, and do we have the right missions, and are we doing our work as it's appropriate, and are we meeting the needs of our regions? And then, delegating that day-to-day management to the institution, and making sure that the work here is at policy level and the procedures are administered throughout the institution. The other criteria for you to be aware of is the criteria that relates to resources planning and institutional effectiveness. And the institution's making sure that the institution's research or resources, structures, processes are sufficient to fill the mission and improve the quality of the educational offerings and respond to future challenges and opportunities. And so there's quite a bit under 5B about governance and administrative structures promoting effective leadership, and the governing board being knowledgeable about the institution and providing the appropriate oversights for financial and academic policies and practices. So again, it's just a timely to point these out as you're doing the work, because they really do need to align. And again, there are many things that we do in our university. There are many constituents we serve, but fundamentally, our accreditation standard is step number 1 for us. And so to go through that work on a regular basis and to make sure we're compliant with their baseline expectations and accountabilities is critical, and it takes all of us to do that work. So let me just kind of say, as I finish, and take questions. I think that It is important to recognize that we are at a moment of transition and that we are at a challenging time in higher education generally, particularly the state of Missouri and the system. But what I am most heartened at in my now 2 years and 1 month or so of serving as provost and now in about 5 weeks or 4 weeks of interim chancellor is the engagement of the faculty and the staff and the willingness of faculty and staff and administration to come together, and also in recognition of the changing of the times, but also that that's not just on our campus. And it is an exciting time, I think, to be with our sister campuses and having conversations that I think previously might not have happened in the University of Missouri system and across our campuses. And I appreciate your work in facilitating that and encouraging us to have that happen. Just one brief little story about me and why I'm particularly excited about the future at UMKC. For those who don't know me, and just to introduce, I actually am a native of Kansas City. I left for 20 years to go to Indiana University Bloomington, but I mentioned that I had been in administrative and business roles previously. My first jobs out of college were to work with a company called Intertech Publishing that was creating the first publication related to cellular telephony nationally, called Cellular Business. And I had an opportunity to go, write some of the first stories about cellular telephones and take the first picture of the first Motorola antenna that went online on their Chicago campus. And I knew cellular phones were going to change the world. Then I found myself having an opportunity to go back to graduate school because I was fully funded by a startup company called Apple Computer to evaluate the first professional development network for teachers across 18 schools in eastern Kansas and western Missouri. And I went home and told my parents personal computers are going to change the world. And then as I was finishing my dissertation, I was invited to take a position at a startup company called Sprint that was forming out of United Telecom. And again, my trivia for everybody is Sprint stands for Southern Pacific Railroad Internal Communications. It was about fiber optic cabling then, and then it moved into cell phones. Those experiences, fiber optic cabling, cellular telephony, and personal computers back in the mid-'80s and early '90s, it was clear that it was going to revolutionize our world and that it was going to revolutionize education as well. And so I'm pleased that I've had the opportunity to work for about 25 years now on the question of how do we leverage technology to create a more personalized learning experience. And I cannot emphasize enough that I think whatever our woes have been in the University of Missouri system and in the state of Missouri for the last couple of years, we are poised not to just get to best practices, but to leapfrog into a future where I do believe we will be a model public urban research university at UMKC, but a model system for this country. And I am very excited to do the work. So thank you. I'm happy to entertain any questions with whatever
We do
moments I
have some
left.
time left, and Chancellor, thank you very much. That was exciting. And you have provided a lot of excitement since taking over as interim chancellor, and we appreciate all you've done. We do have a little bit of time here, just a few minutes before we have to move into the lunch with the students, but any questions or comments?
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for hosting us, Barbara. I really appreciate it. One thing that concerned me, the 54% of staff that considered leaving, that worries me a little bit. How did that compare to the other campuses within the system? Do you think, so there's a couple of questions here.
Right.
Do you think that their interest or considering leaving is due to cultural factors, or is it salary-based? And if it's salary-based, how far are they below comparable institutions, and is there really a deficit there that we need to seriously address? So go ahead.
So several things.
Can I answer that question? That's okay?
Sure. Can I follow you after you answer it?
We'll allow both of you to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Barbara.
Of course,
Go ahead,
President Choi.
Dr.
All
Choi.
right. Across the system, Curator Chadman, the percentage of staff members who had seriously considered leaving, I believe, stands at 53%. And 61% of those who said they were considering leaving the university said that salary was the biggest concern that they had, followed by, I believe, around 54%, which indicated that they were concerned about the lack of a path forward for advancement, so opportunities. For example, if they received another degree, would there be opportunities within the organization? And in terms of their salary, there's not a very good database for faculty and staff salaries. but the faculty salaries that I'm going to be sharing tomorrow indicate that for assistant professors, they typically make, compared to their peers, in the bottom quintile. And so that's a big concern for us as well.
So, and I would just echo that to say that at UMKC, we follow the system norm. But again, those 2 points about a salary and opportunities for advancement, part of the thing to know about opportunities for advancement, and this goes back to the idea of professional development. And again, when I was at Sprint, I was in the human resources development function, and I was responsible, I was the curriculum owner for their total quality management curriculum. So I got to do quite a bit of HRD work in that context that informs what I do here. One of the things that we need to understand is when we lack the capacity to increase salaries in the ways that we need to do, we're just simply not going to make that jump as quickly as we would like. The single greatest motivator for people beyond salary and a baseline, a quality salary, is their ability to engage in ongoing professional development, their ability to get good feedback and be able to just grow. And that really plays into the idea of a higher education institution being a learning enterprise. So those are reasons why I think looking at our staff development opportunities, looking at how we have a stronger training and development function for staff and for faculty really is critical. That's not just a nice thing to help them learn about new technologies and new ways of doing business. It's a critical function in terms of the idea of support. And one of the things that Marcia and I have talked about a little bit, and actually the general officers talked about at their retreat, is I would challenge the institution, and I'm challenging us at UMKC. The Chronicle of Higher Education does have an annual Great Places to Work For competition. They have some key metrics and key rubrics that they look at that I think that at UMKC we're going to be looking at, and I think their statements about what does a quality work experience look like in higher ed, and it informs what we need to be thinking about to do. So
Just one follow-up. I've heard that on, across campuses, salaries, whether it be faculty or staff. And if we're waiting, I think if we're going to wait for the legislature to give us more money to do that, it's not going to happen. So I'm wondering, does UMKC have a plan in place to maybe make some cuts on campus and other things that may not be that productive in order to provide the money to just go ahead and get it done as opposed to waiting on the legislature to do something?
We're not waiting on the legislature for anything ever again. Let me just say that. We're talking about empowering ourselves, and what that means is several things. First of all, again, we're actually in a hiring freeze right now because we would rather not hire people than actually have to cut good people here. Secondly, though, we've talked about the fact that we just have to double down on our performance orientation here and make sure that we protect and take care of our best people, and that we help develop the people who, for whatever reason, aren't being as successful as they need to be in their work. But third, that idea about moving towards shared services and figuring out how we better organize the institution, that's critical in terms of thinking about how we move forward. We have about, and I don't know that Carol Hintz is here, but Sharon can tell me. I think our annual employee churn is about 20%. Is that right, Sharon? 14% or so. So what that means for us is that because we have a turnover rate of employees that's pretty regular, we just simply need to be smart about who we hire back and who we don't hire back and how we move into the future. But finally, I'll say, critical for us, and this is something that we talked about with the new curators yesterday, we have got to get out of the mindset of cut. And we at UMKC have to get to grow. Because when you look at student enrollments in our peer institutions in urban settings, the MSA size that we have, we should have capacity to grow. But it's not just simply growing students in traditional programming. We will be looking at what can we do in non-traditional, in competency-based education, in non-credit bearing programming, because I think we have an opportunity to serve business and industry in this region that we haven't really fully taken advantage of strategically. So we're looking for every good growth idea, but that gets to the fact that, historically, again, there are 5 revenue sources in higher education. And for a public institution, state appropriations has been the number one that we've thought about, tuition second, research, auxiliary services, and foundation. Our foundation is relatively new, so it's not where we need it to be yet, and we're still working on that. But we're talking a lot about and committed to the idea of turning that idea that our primary revenue source is going to be state appropriations. Our primary revenue source is going to be tuition, so we've got to figure out what students need. We've got to figure out how to deliver on it, and we've got to make sure that the programs we have meet the needs of our region. And that's, in a nutshell, our strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Barbara, thank you so much. You talk a lot about systemness and shared systems. So as we sit on this board, what recommendations do you have that the system could be doing to better support you and your initiatives of mass customization?
Well, thank you for that question. And honestly, I had a couple notes where I was going to catch Curator Bernchick after the conversation. First of all, I think it is really important to determine what system means. And we had that conversation at the retreat, and what the role is. And honestly, again, I will say there are ways where I think that the University of Missouri system is probably smaller than it needs to be, and there are places where it may need to be different than it is. And so for one example, and there's guidance for this, and having come out of a system academic affairs role for the last 7 years, I think about this constantly. And it has a lot to do with the way the CRRs are formulated, but it also has a lot to do with what is our commitment. So for example, I don't want to have, this is my best example, I don't want to have to process international H-1B visas on my campus. That is a highly technical, high enterprise risk management activity. It has many repercussions if you don't do it well, and it is the exact same process on every single campus. There are things that I think system can and should provide that, or again, in the idea of integrated services or integrated or coherent decentralization or coherent integration, whatever phrase we come for that, system should then be the broker for the campus that is going to pick that up. But there are a few things, and I think the first question, beyond HLC accreditation requirements, what are the few things that every campus has to do? They follow the exact same process. It's huge risk management if we don't do it well, and we have accreditation accountabilities or other accountabilities. And system ought to make sure that they are overseeing that. And it gets to the idea, I've talked to Steve about that idea of chief policy officer, that idea of making sure that internal audit is strong and that enterprise risk management is foundational. And if we start from that, make sure we're addressing our baselines and doing all the things our accreditors say, and that we're looking at how system oversees that, we're going to move in a really good direction. And that would be incredibly value added to me as a provost and interim chancellor in my institution to assure that you were delivering the accountabilities for me that we need.
Let me add, we have student leaders who are waiting for us in room 302. This is a big deal for them. So, Barbara, again, thank you so much. And I know that if we don't have this other commitment, would be a lot more questions. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And
I'm happy
so-
to talk offline. Thank you.
So let's head down to room 302 for lunch with our student leaders.